Thank you for joining us. I'm Michael Miller, and today we're going to be talking about Miami Lakes with its mayor, Manny. So thank you very much for joining us, Mayor.
No, thank you. I'm excited.
All right.
Excited to be on your show.
So you're a unique sort of guy, all right? And we're going to get into it, what makes you unique and first time out. But let's talk about where you grew up and how you got to this point in your life.
Wow. So I was born in Hialeah Hospital, in the city of Hialeah.
You heard it right here. Born in Hialeah.
Born in Hialeah. First home, when I was just born, we lived in Carroll City at the time. Then we moved when I was maybe 8 months to
Who's we?
my mom, my dad, and my grandmother.
Okay.
We moved when I was 8 months old to Hialeah. I lived in Hialeah till I was about 9. Then we moved 8 years old. Then we moved to Miami Lakes. At the time, Miami Lakes was not incorporated. So we lived in unincorporated Dade County. And all the services I enjoyed as a kid were in the parks in Hialeah. So I learned how to swim in the parks in Hialeah. I learned how to play baseball, basketball, football, street hockey. I mean, you name it. And it was all at the Hialeah parks.
So Miami Lakes was actually, that was the unincorporated part. The Graham family own that, and they've really done a great job in making it stay beautiful all these years. Really had their hands on it. So my hat's off to the people of Miami Lakes, and obviously you learned to go along with that. So at some point you decided you're going to go to Miami-Dade College. Tell us what you studied.
I did. So I immediately after high school, I went to Miami-Dade College in Hialeah. They had just opened the Hialeah campus right on 49th Street. And I took some classes there. I took some classes at North Campus. But I was a bit of a rebel. I became enamored with politics and the science behind politics. So I would sit down with my counselors at 18, 19 years old. They were like, you need to start taking some core requirements. And I'm like, yeah, sign me up for them. But make sure you sign me up for all these poli-sci classes. And when they would sign me up, I would drop them immediately, all the core credits, because I loved politics so much, and that's all I wanted to focus on at that time. And I spent...
And you're how old? 18, 19?
18, 19 years old.
So when did you recognize that you enjoyed that?
So I had a professor at North Campus, 2 professors. One of them, Anna Ward. She was a former mayor of El Portal. I believe she was a chair. I think she's still in the CITT. And Eloy Velasquez, actually still Miami Lakes resident. Took both of their classes, and that's when I realized how much I enjoyed politics. I first wanted to be a marine biologist, so I love the ocean. I love ocean life. My mom signed me up for this camp in Key Largo at John Penny Camp. And that's when I realized I have middle ear challenges and I get seasick immediately. So that career was over right off the bat. And that's when the shift to politics, because I realized something, Mike, very important. Everything we do, everything. Somebody made a decision along the way to put a rule. If you want to, whatever you wanted to do, if you buy this building, just the process of purchasing the building, somebody made that process along the way, and somebody in an elective position many of that time. So that's when I became enamored with the process of political science.
At some point you said, all right, I'm done with Miami-Dade College. On to the next step, which was where?
So I ended up getting 60-some credits at Miami-Dade, but there were some core classes I just wasn't interested in taking, and I ended up leaving, and I went to FIU. I started taking poli-sci classes at FIU. Some of those classes I took with Dario Moreno at FIU.
He was the go-to guy for politics for a long time for most of the media.
He was, and the Metropolitan Center there at FIU, and I was a junior in college when I decided to make another shift, which I applied for a job at 21 years old in the state legislature as an aide to the representative that represented Hialeah.
21, 22 years old-ish.
Yeah, I was 20. You know what? I was 21 years old.
So were you done with school at that point?
No. So here's and again, it's not orthodox, the route that I took.
But somebody made the ruls somewhere along the way. Some politician said, "This is the road." You said, "I'm taking a different road."
I'm taking a different road. So I was a junior at FIU, and I got a job offer. So I had a choice to make: stay at FIU, get a degree, or risk it all, bet on myself, drop school, and go to Tallahassee. And I prayed about it, talked to my parents about it, and I went to Tallahassee, and that changed my life. It was November, December of 2005. So yeah, so I was 21 years old, 21 years old when I decided, when I accepted the position.
That was a paid position?
It was a paid position in the state legislature. Yep.
So that must have been pretty exciting for you. You said, there's my home. There it is right over there.
It was really, it wasn't a lot of money. A lot of people don't realize that the state of Florida is one of the most frugal governments in our nation. So I think my starting pay was either, and this is 2005, 2006, $27,000. So, but it wasn't about the money so much. I mean, just the opportunity. A kid who comes from a working class background. My parents weren't powerful or well connected, but to have an opportunity like that, I just couldn't say no to it. And I felt like I was on top of the world. So
what was it like the first day you report to work?
It was eye opening. So I didn't own any suits ever. So I was using my dad's suits, which were about 2-3 sizes too big. I had never.
And 10 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm being nice.
No, yeah, very true. And I had never been in an office setting. So I didn't even know how to pick up the phones correctly. And I remember being taught just the process of saying, "Good morning, this is state representative's office," and going through the process. But it was eye-opening. And then going to Tallahassee, I'll never forget the first day on Appalachia Parkway, rolling up and seeing the Capitol. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was just so astonished that I'm going to be working in that building, one of the most important capitals in our country.
So when you're standing there and sitting there and watching yourself being involved in that, what did it take you back to inside?
It took me back to the sacrifices that my grandmother and my parents went through to come here to this country. So they had everything taken away from them in Cuba. To the point where my mom was she was in a work camp as a little kid in forced labor. That was in Cuba. That was in Cuba. My dad had to flee and go to Costa Rica. My mom, my grandmother, and my uncle went to Spain for 3 years. Then when they got here, they worked in factories in Hialeah, but they pinched pennies. I mean, to the point where going to the Capitol was one of the first times. These are little things a lot of people don't appreciate, where the hand soap wasn't watered down. So we couldn't, growing up, a lot of people don't take appreciation of stuff. Growing up, we would buy one bottle of soap that would last us 6 months because we would put little drops into other bottles, shake it, and that was our hand. So like having that opportunity to work somewhere where you're going to be making, part of the policy making process was such an honor, because all I kept thinking about was the sacrifices that they made throughout the years so my generation could be successful. And I was like, not that I felt that I made it. I just felt that, this was
very fulfilling for you.
Oh no, it was unbelievable.
So where are you at with school at this point?
So I was still a junior at FIU. The state at the time, they would encourage their staffers to go back to school. So I ended up going back to school, but I just didn't have the time. And at that point, I knew more than some of my professors, because the professors were talking about the theory of poli-sci. I was already doing the practice. So when they would talk about the legislative process, I was like, in my head, I'm like, I've already written a couple state statutes. I've already appropriated money in the state budget. So it became challenging because some of my professors I did, and I didn't want to tell them that, but I already knew more than they did because they had never practiced it. They were speaking about just the theory side of it, So I ended up not going. I went back to school for a couple semesters, and I just ended up dropping it. I didn't see the value at that time to go back to finish school.
So tell us about some of the state statutes that you helped author.
So one of them that I'm incredibly proud of was the carbon monoxide safety bill. Today, since 2006, every home in Florida that has a fossil fuel burning appliance or has a garage, when they get built, they have a carbon monoxide detector installed. Unfortunately, I've known several folks who've passed away due to carbon monoxide poisoning. Actually, one of my neighbors growing up passed away because they had parked the car in the garage, and a lot of folks don't realize that if you leave it on a little bit long, Carbon monoxide is the that silent killer because you can't even smell it, and by the time you realize it's too late. They was inspired by an incident that happened in the city of Hialeah. 2 young people had passed away as well from carbon monoxide poisoning, and we were able to work through the legislative process. It wasn't easy to get it done. And today, who knows how many lives have been saved.
You were how old when you did that?
I was 2007, so I was 22, 23 years old.
Still wet back here.
100%.
Good for you, man. That's wonderful. So at some point, he said, all right, I'm going to go back to Miami, and I want to do something in politics.
So after spending 7 years in the state legislature.
That's a big deal to spend that length of time.
Oh, no, it was. I knew it was challenging because I was one of those folks that appreciated the process so much that I rarely went out. Most people would go out, have a good time. I stayed in my room studying. So I realized, I go, look, I was one of the few people up there who, and not to say that everybody in the legislature, their families are well connected and that's why they're there, but I was one of those few folks who came from a working class background. So I felt that I had to outwork everybody. So instead of hanging out at FSU or hanging out in the Capitol, I would stay in my room, read up on the state statutes, read up on the state budget. I had to make sure that I worked harder than everybody else intellectually to get to that level. So I spent 7 years understanding the entire process everywhere. I would sit down with committee staffers, with committee attorneys, and I would every single lobbying group in Florida, I would meet with them.
Where does that come from inside you?
From that work ethic from my parents and my grandmother. I mean, listen, when they got here, the first day they got here, they went to work in factories in East Hialeah. And it wasn't, nobody told them, hey, this is the job for you. They went up to the doors, knocked on the doors, said, hey, and this is the garment industry back then, knocked on the doors and said, hey, do you need work? And they would work, and then they would leave after an 8-10 hour shift and go knock on the next guy. Hey, I see you're open at midnight. And that work ethic was instilled.
So your work there was just a continuation of the Sid family of moving forward.
Oh, 100%. My mom's a great example of that. I mean, my mom is somebody that got here at 18 years old, 17, 18 years old. Didn't know English. Not only would she work during the entire day, but she went to night school at Hialeah High to learn English, to assimilate into society and to get her GED. And once she did that, she did so well, she ended up getting a scholarship to Biscayne College. Got her degree in psychology, then got her master's in psychology. And today, she's still, 40 plus years later, she's still at the same job.
You know, people in the middle of the country don't know these stories and have never heard them. But since we all live that, you know, in particular at this point, it is inspiring. And I remember asking my father in the early 60s, I don't understand. These Cubans come over here, and in 3 years, they own a house, they own a car. It looks like they're the president of the bank. How is it? So I'm pretty young at that point. And he says, Michael, when people that come to the United States, they are driven. They want this. They're not born with a silver spoon in their mouth. I thought he was talking about me, but I'm not sure. But we see that and how important that is for the evolution of humankind, that we have people that are driving and trying to make that better. So my hat's off to your grandparents and to your folks for leading that way. And we always know that the children are always watching us.
Oh, yeah.
Every day,
oh, yeah.
all the time.
Oh, yeah.
You know, what's mom doing? What's that? And that passes from generation to generation. So at some point you say, okay, I'm ready for Miami Lakes. How did that whole process start?
So as an aide in the legislature, we would meet with every city, every mayor. I mean, just everybody during the legislative session. I did it for 7 years, and I started realizing, I was like, man, some of these folks that I'm meeting with, they shouldn't be in elected office. I mean, these folks, some of them, they didn't have the character required to be making those decisions. Some of those folks maybe weren't ethical. Some of those folks, and I kept saying that to myself. And I remember talking to the state rep. I worked for 2 different state reps, one for 1 year, another one for 6 years. And I would tell them all the time, I was like, it's like, man, I can't believe our local communities are governed sometimes by folks who, I don't know, I feel like don't have the talent or work ethic or don't have their heart in the right place. They come up here and it's like they're partying, they're having a great time instead of doing the people's business. And that's something that opened up my eyes. So when At that point, I was married. I had 2 small kids. My youngest was 3. No, my oldest was 3. My youngest was 1.5. And I said to my wife, I go, you know what? I've done this for 7 years. I think it's time to do something different. I mean, it takes a toll on us too, because I would have to travel. I would have to leave them. There was a couple sessions they went up with me, but I would have to leave them 6 months out of the year. It was getting to a point that I would travel US 27 because it was at least a scenic route. I would drive it every single week. I would leave Miami Lakes Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, get to Tallahassee, go to sleep, hit the Capitol in the morning, Friday afternoon, back to Miami, driving. Because we couldn't afford flights, because at that point there was only one flight back and forth, and it was so expensive. But I told my wife, I go, look, I think it's time to take it to the next level. My wife, who is my confidant, my best friend, my soulmate, she was like, you know what, I'm going to back you up. I agree. And that's when I made a decision to leave the state legislature. I ended up resigning. Ended up running for the city council, and at the same time trying to make ends meet. I started working in the construction industry for a little bit, which was interesting in itself.
Let me see those hands.
No,
it was only for a little bit. I can say
it was fun, but it wasn't. At the time, it wasn't for me. And I did a lot of like construction management and turnkey projects, but I wanted to do something else. So at the same time that I was running, I was running. There was 2 slates. There was the slate of the incumbent mayor, who had 3 candidates. There was a slate of the founding mayor, who had 3 candidates. Unfortunately, we ended up 3 of the people on my side, all 3 ended up losing, and I was the only one that ended up winning on my end. And I ended up winning because I outworked everybody. I ended up knocking on 6,000 doors.
So what was it like when it was announced that you won?
So we were at Ruby Tuesday in Miami Lakes. It no longer exists. The pandemic shut it off. So that night was interesting, Mike. So I couldn't afford much. So I remember we had like a pasta salad that had some meat and some peas in the middle of the table, and I would only let people get 1 beer each, and it was just like a handful of us around the table. And the first results came out. We lost absentee ballots, and we lost early voting. And I remember the other folks, those races were decided. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, wow, there's only 7 precincts left. What are we it looks like we might have, who knows? So the first 4 precincts come in. I lose them all. I'm down 500 votes.
Down 500, 3 precincts left.
So I'm down 500 votes. I'm like, oh my goodness. I put in all this work. So, all right, so the next precinct comes in. I net 50 votes. Okay, we're in this. I'm down 450 votes. The next precinct comes in, which is closer to where I grew up. We net 250 votes. I was like, okay, we're down 200. My home, and the one that's left is my home precinct. I ended up winning my home precinct by 500 votes.
Oh,
and we won the election. Mary Collins was my opponent, who's a friend of mine today. She's a big supporter of mine today. We have a building named after her, former county commissioner, state committee woman, ran for Congress, very honorable person. And she called me. One thing that I always appreciate about her, she called me at night, and we had a great conversation. And it was that moment where I realized, I go, even though there's policy differences, not personal. And she was like, Manny, I wish you all the best. And ever since then, she's always supported me, which for me meant a lot, because I feel like that more of that needs to happen.
So there it was. You're sitting around with a half a dozen, 10 of your buddies, and you go, oh my goodness, we won. What was that like for you and your family?
It was surreal. It was surreal because everybody thought we lost. So people had left. You know how
there's 2 minutes left in the game. All right, turn it off.
When you win, everybody's your friend.
Yeah.
When you lose, that's when you realize the most important people. So I think for me, it was a blessing that happened, because it showed me that the most important folks that were going to be there no matter what was my family, my closest friends.
And how old were you when you won that first election?
29 years old.
That's
28 years old, 28, 29 years old. Yep.
amazing, especially for a town that was so sophisticated, right? That people more look like me than
Yep.
you, right? And it was like very protected area. You always felt when you went up there they were guard dogs, even though they weren't. All right, it's like, okay, this is something different, something special. So there you are. You say, okay, great. I'm the mayor. Now what? So how do you start that off?
Well, no, back then I was on the council.
Council. I'm sorry.
So here's what's interesting. I was on the council. I get elected into a minority, and this is where our faith, or some people call it the universe. I say it's, I always said it's God. There are always God incidences in our life. So I get elected into a minority. I can't get anything passed. Nothing. Everything that I propose, they're shooting down. They're lining up people to speak against me.
But you had some experience in that in Tallahassee.
Oh, I did, but they weren't used to the persistence.
Yeah.
So listen, you can vote me down, but I'm not going to stop. If it's the right thing to do, and I would keep going. But here's what happened. 7-8 months later, mayor gets arrested by the FBI. 2 of our council members who didn't have anything to do with it, but they were implicated in the indictment, so nobody knew what was going to happen. And city gets turned upside down. They need somebody who...
You're on the city council. That was your elected position. So 3 people are... Whoops.
Well, one of them got arrested, and the other 2, nobody knew what was going to happen because they had him in the indictment.
Yeah.
If they ended up nothing, they didn't do anything, and they ended up not getting in trouble. But at the time, nobody knew. And I remember we had to call an emergency meeting, and they needed somebody who was ethical, who was high character, high moral.
Who is they, by the way?
The other council members.
Got it. Okay.
So I remember them having that conversation on the dais in a public level, and I became, from going in the minority, I became the vice mayor of the town, the youngest vice mayor at 29 years old.
So how long?
There was no mayor.
And how long was that from the time you were elected till that moment?
About 7 months.
Okay. So you went from like, I'm going to run for office, and all of a sudden you're vice mayor.
At 29 years old, not only vice mayor, spotlight is on me because there's no mayor. So I'm the de facto mayor running the meetings. And there's a trust deficit in the community. So everything was thrown on my shoulders in terms of I did it every single interview. I was in front of the camera every day. I went, so I go from being in the minority to being in the spotlight. But those are things that prepare you for the future as well, right? But that was an interesting experience, to say the least.
So let's move on to a couple of things. One, at some point or another, you went back to school. Are you in school now?
I am.
And what are you studying?
I'm getting my PhD now. I left it alone. I didn't sign up for this semester because of the campaign that I'm on. But I'm going to go back now. We're doing an ethical leadership, character and leadership.
Good for you. Then you decide you want to be in the restaurant business.
I did. So I went from trying my hand in the construction world, which wasn't for me. I ended up going into commercial leasing of shopping centers for a little bit. Then I owned an adult daycare, which went well. Sold that, and after eating at Frank Ortis's restaurant in Pines for years, he inspired me to open up a spot in Miami Lakes with 2 of my partners, with Danny and Jeff, and it was fun. It was a fun journey.
I just asked our producer for an extra 10 minutes, so we got 10 minutes left. He's looking at me now going, hey, what's going on?
No worries. Okay, we could be going on for hours. We'll finish it up.
Okay. So what are some of the things that your team, yourself, and the city would like to have occur, or the town of Miami Lakes?
To be honest with you, everything I've wanted to do in the last 12 years, we've either done it or the train has left the station, which is a good thing, right? Getting those trains moving, those ideas moving are tough. For example, right now we've fully funded the largest infrastructure project in our community's history, which is largest transportation project ever, Northwest 59th Avenue, which is a huge feat in itself. It was an idea that I came up with one day when we were talking about parking for commercial vehicles and RVs. And that ended up coming to fruition. So today I leave the mayoralship in November, but that next mayor has that already planned for and paid, and a bunch of other projects like the Gratney entrance from off of 67th, the extension of 87th Avenue to I-75. All those things have already been planned and moving forward.
So we know that the county overall is dealing with septic tanks, which everybody or most people want to get rid of. We know in Miami Lakes, it's just a very few. Why don't you explain what the city has done concerning those
So
septic tanks?
we have about 20 homes that have septic tanks, and we're in the process of doing the conversion. We've requested money from the state, and we're going to move forward on that because that helps us fix up those roads, fix up that area. Because traditionally, that was an area of town that a lot of people don't even know that exists. It's right when you get off. If you're heading northbound and you get off of 154, it's next to the White House building all the way down. Nobody knows that that exists except the people that live back there. And that's a pocket of our town that isn't septic tank. They're not in bad conditions like those septic tanks closer to the ocean, but still, I think that connection is vitally important to our water quality and safety and in the future of Miami-Dade County.
A couple of years ago, the state passed a law concerning Live Local, which allows developers, landowners to put up more apartments or condos in certain areas. How does that affect Miami Lakes?
It's very detrimental. I think anytime, look, state legislators, they mean well. The challenge is a lot of the special interests, instead of dealing with a 400 plus municipalities, 60 plus counties, they go directly to the legislative leadership and they request preemption on issues, which becomes challenging. One size doesn't fit all. The same way the state government complains about the federal government trying to mandate things is the same thing that happens to local cities. We should be able to vote with our feet. The moment we lose that ability, that's the moment we lose a lot of our liberties, right? If we go to every city in Florida and it's all the same, that's not good. That diversity, we need to protect the diversity. It's not only diversity of thought, but just the way that our communities are developed.
So a lot of the cities have objected and some changes are being made. And so it is the state, pushing the counties and the cities. When people said different cities would complain, I say, you mean like what the county does to the cities.
Yep.
So everybody is pushing back and forth. But at the end of the day, people speak up and they know how to do it. They can make some adjustments to those, and I think they're doing it. Who knows what it all means? I'm sure at some point soon there'll be something that's done. So right now you have two young children.
Four.
Well,
I just
four. Oh my goodness.
We had our fourth about a month ago.
All right.
Actually, 2 months ago. Now,
So congratulations on that. So, and we're going to wrap up in a couple of minutes, but what advice would you give to young people, all right, about getting involved in politics?
Look, if you don't get involved, somebody else is going to get involved for you. And if you truly believe that your kids and your grandkids should continue to live in your local communities, I mean, you have to get involved civically. I mean, when the idea of civilization, the citizenship started, when the Greeks started having those ideas come to fruition, the participatory part was so important. They wanted to have people participate in the process. Citizenship. It's not just getting a passport that says you're a U.S. citizen, or citizenship is a moral obligation to participate in the ongoings of your local communities, to speak up, to be independent of government, to see in a different way, to create your own businesses, to be leaders in your community. But I think the idea of citizenship for some people, it's and again, there's difference, not just the citizenship being a U.S. citizen, but citizenship as to what Bob Graham used to believe in, right? And making sure that you're involved. That's disappearing. I mean, you have communities, you have large communities here in Dade County, City of Miami, City of Hialeah, two of the largest cities, the largest cities in Dade County. Their participation rates are on the floor. I mean, I get elected with more votes as mayor of the town of Miami Lakes than a commissioner in the city of Miami who oversees $1 billion budget.
So your advice is get involved, all right, and stay active, because you can make a difference. That's what I'm hearing out of this.
You have to. Listen, if not, you can't complain. It's tough to complain when you don't at least speak, and you'd be surprised as to the difference that you can make in your life.
So many of us are lucky that we have mentors or people that we've appreciated through the years and providing success and support and a hand up and a clap on the back. I want you to think about somebody, or somebody's alive or otherwise that you'd like to thank. And if you were looking over in this this camera right over here, we got them up on the screen over there, and talk to them.
Well, look, it's my parents and my grandmother. I mean, I grew up in a household that was very loving, very nurturing, unconditional love. But more than anything, they would talk about at the dinner table the importance of getting involved. My dad ran a crisis unit in the city of Miami, the largest mental health crisis unit. My mom runs a vocational rehab unit. Two very empathetic human beings, and then my grandmother was the person who did it all, who helped create that foundation. So all three of them, those were my mentors, the folks I look up to, the motivation that I seek. I pray all the time, and I talk to my dad and my grandmother who are up in heaven, and my mom who's still with us. And those are those examples in our lives that really make such a difference. And for me, I think about them every day, because if I do something that would be wrong, unethical, illegal, it wouldn't dishonor me. It could dishonor me as a human being, my immediate family, my kids, my wife, but it would dishonor all the sacrifices that they made throughout all these decades. So I think it's.
Manny said, "Thank you so much. You're a gentleman's gentleman. Congratulations to you and your family, and to your folks and grandma. Folks, thank you for joining us. Remember, take care of yourselves and your family. Have a good day."